Welcome, Boilers Extra. I'm Nathan Baird from Indy Star.
Sam King from the Journal and Courier.
That was impressive and unsettling, I think, if depending on how you want to look at it. Iowa State came into Mackey Arena and just blasted Purdue 81-58. This was a 4-point game at halftime, and Iowa State owned the second half. Like, they just came in here and took over. It reminded me a little bit of the Wisconsin game last year. Or was it the Ohio State game? It was Wisconsin. Wisconsin came in and just like shot the lights out in the middle of Big Ten season, and it was the last time I had seen a team really come in and kind of take things over. Was it Ohio State?
After the Washington-Oregon trip.
Yeah. Somebody came in and just torched the place. Oh, it was Wisconsin to hit a bunch of threes, though. Anyway.
It's happened before.
It's happened before, but we thought maybe this team was not vulnerable to something like that happening. To be just wiped out to this magnitude. And I thought, from talking to the players and Matt Painter after the game, I think they recognized the sort of resilience gap and the intensity gap between these teams, that Purdue missed shots and it missed some open shots. Like, it's going to have nights like that. I just feel like it comes back to what we've talked about since the beginning of the season is Purdue. What is the best version of Purdue on its worst shooting nights? And will that be enough to beat other good teams? And tonight, not only was it not good enough to beat other good teams, they got absolutely run off their own floor.
Yeah, and the most concerning thing for me from seeing that is just watching Purdue kind of, in a sense, give up. There were some guys that were still playing hard and trying to make plays, and then guys kind of really got out of control, which is when things really started to snowball. But you don't see Purdue teams roll over and die, and the shots weren't falling. Purdue's defense was lacking on the other end, and as things got more and more out of hand, you saw the frustrations. You saw guys hanging their heads, and I really just thought that this was a team that the experience was going to find ways to stay in games, and for the first half it did, because the way it shot in the second half was much like the first half, but it was forcing turnovers and getting some easy buckets in transition, and only down 4 despite shooting like 37% in the first half. But it didn't carry over. The defense from the get-go in the second half was just letting Iowa State penetrate and get the shots that it wanted, and as Matt Painter called it, it was an avalanche from that point.
The seeds of this were in that first half, even though they're only down by 4 at halftime. But they scored, I think, 11 points off turnovers in the first 10 minutes. They were essentially using the Iowa State playbook to be in this game early. I mean, they were the team that was coming out and creating turnovers. Braden Smith doing something that, when he does it, almost always works for Purdue, the way he can come out and be a defensive catalyst, starting the break. There were other guys out there getting steals, starting the break. Like, they were generating offense that way. They just couldn't score in the half court for any number of reasons. Some of it was missing open looks. Some of it was the way that Iowa State, I thought, came out with a really good plan and executed it well in neutralizing the ball or the pick and roll stuff that Braden Smith and Trey Kofferman like to do, collapsing on Trey Kofferman, making life really difficult for him. He finished the game 1 of 8 from the field, and I think he was 1 of 8 at halftime, wasn't he? Or early in the second half, he was already 1 of 8.
Something like 0 for 6, and then he made 1, and then he missed the next one, and then he had the one that sat on the rim for an eternity, and he tipped it back in.
Yeah.
That they said it was still over the cylinder when he got it. But yeah, tough day for Trey Kofferman. He did, especially when he got very frustrated. He started going after rebounds ferociously and ends up with 9 boards, had 4 assists. So it's not like he played a terrible overall game, but the shooting wasn't there, and Purdue's going to have to find ways to win games when shots aren't falling. Maybe it doesn't shoot this poorly, but to have Trey Kofferman and Fletcher Lawyer, I think, were combined 3 for 16. It's not going to happen very often, but when it does, you've got to capitalize on the points off turnovers, playing well defensively, doing well rebounding. And even though Purdue was decent on the boards, I think they actually ended up with 1 more rebound. I thought Iowa State was more aggressive going after the ball and getting boards, and was not dominating the boards early, but was getting more than Purdue was on those 50-50 balls.
I think they went into halftime only down 4. And when you look at a number of things that happened in that first half, you say, well, they can't shoot. They can shoot, but they're not making any shots. And, they're not turning the ball over. Like, it seemed like they were in a place where it we've seen this before. Like, okay, things kind of scuffled in the first half, and they come back in the second half and they start making those shots. They take care of the ball. They get some stops and they find a way to win the game. That's kind of what I thought this would be. That's how they would win a 4 or 5 point game at the end of this thing. And that was with Joshua Jefferson only not playing the final 6 minutes, 9 seconds of the first half because they wanted to keep him away from committing that third foul, which would have taken him off the floor for a large chunk of the second half. Well, guess what? He commits it 30 seconds into the second half. It feels like things are falling in Purdue's favor at that point. And then from the time he left the game to the time he came back in about 8 minutes later, the lead for Ohio State went from 6 to 18. And to me, that is where that says everything. That you could take one of the best players in the country, certainly, or I mean, arguably one of the best players in the country, definitely one of Iowa State's best players, take him off the court. You have Purdue starters out there on their home floor, and they get tripled up in terms of the lead at that point. And by the time he's back in the game, they're down. I mean, coming back from 18 points, even at home, a team that can shoot as well as Purdue on a given day, that's a tough task with only 11 minutes and change left. I keep coming back to something that Matt Painter said to me when I sat down with him before the season, which was our players who play the most have to be our best defenders. And I just thought this was an example of a game where when shots weren't falling at one end, guys who were on the court the most weren't making enough of a difference at the other end of the floor. And there were too many open looks for Iowa State. Then the turnovers did start coming. They started generating offense off of those in the second half. Avalanche was a good term for it. But I thought the avalanche didn't happen until the big start of the second half. The seeds were the snow got jostled or whatever in the first half. And then it was slowly, I don't know, it's like one of those perpetual motion machines. And then finally when it started coming, it was just, they just got buried under it to start the second half.
Yeah, and Purdue had a chance at the end of the first half to cut it to one possession. I can't remember if it was a turnover or a missed shot. And then Iowa State got a clean look from three that seemed like if he would have made that, that would have been crucial. And it turns out, no, that was, the things were kind of already being written at that point. And Iowa State cleaned up the turnovers in the second half, played much better offensively, kept doing what it did defensively. I thought also you talk about what it did defensively, taking away that pick and roll, threw a lot of different looks. So, Braden Smith was not seeing the same thing multiple times in a row. And he ends up, stat line looks okay, and then you get to the turnovers. He had 6 turnovers. One of those probably wasn't his fault, but also kind of was because he tried to throw a behind-the-back pass to Omer Meyer over here in the wing, and it went out of bounds. Not a pass that you think you would be looking for on a fast break, but also you got to kind of expect those are coming by now, playing with a guy like that. But, yeah, just the best players did not play very well, and the role players didn't help in that regard. It kind of was like a snowball effect. And now it's more about how you respond. Matt Painter alluded to going to Birmingham last year and playing Auburn and just getting their tails kicked. They got beaten and bruised, and they were out-toughened and out-classed in that game. And they saw the benefit of that 3 months down the line in the NCAA tournament. Now it's about how you take this and how you get better moving forward, because the next time you're in a game like this, if you let the same thing happen, it kind of becomes who you are.
When they got woodshedded by that Auburn team last year, though, I mean, it's essentially a road game, and we knew that team had vulnerabilities.
That Purdue team was not as talented as this one, and that Auburn team was the best team in the country at the time.
At that moment, and especially how athletic they were, it just seemed like a bad matchup, especially for that team, and a bad, it's just a tough task to go on the road. And Auburn ends up being up by at 33 with 7 minutes left. It was a clear pummeling. But to me, that wasn't as alarming as this is, because this is a better Purdue team. You're playing on your home floor. They're the team that has to come in on the road for a noon Saturday game. And I don't know, that felt like something that should have been in Purdue's favor. And one of their best players is off the floor for the first 6 minutes of the second half and essentially the first 8+ minutes of the second half, and you still got stomped. And this can't be a thing where it's like, well, that's just one of the things you're going to get from Purdue this year. I mean, it can be, but they won't win a national championship that way. And Matt Painter alluded to that after the game. Like, this is one of those things that, like, if this is inside you and another team can bring this out of you on your home floor, then how do you win 6 games in a row in March? I think it's fair to talk about this team that way because that's the way this team talks about itself. Like, Trey Conferman earlier this week in an interview, or maybe it was, I can't remember, maybe it was after the game. I think it was after the game at Rutgers on Tuesday. It was like, oh, I'm just so focused on winning a national championship. I don't remember even what the context of the question was, but like, that's all they talk about. So if you want to win a national championship, you cannot let a team do this to you. You can't let a team rattle you this way. It's a lot of credit goes to Iowa State. They came in with a great plan. They executed it very well. They were the ones that seized momentum when it was there to be seized. They did a very tough thing. Winning in Mackey is a tough thing. Winning to this magnitude is an impossible thing. Like, we never see teams do this.
Right.
And they hadn't even lost a non-conference game at home since 2019, even as tough as they schedule in the non-conference. But this has to be something that they find a way to drive out of themselves. Like, the next time they get the next time this harassment comes and the frustration starts to mount on offense, someone has to be the voice and the action that interrupts that blocks off that avalanche.
Yeah, and what you saw tonight was some guys just, running around with their hair on fire kind of a little bit, trying to make plays that a lot of times are going to be frustration fouls more than plays. It benefited them a couple of times, but I think the real moment in this game, which you don't think about as it's happening, Purdue got off to a great start. The crowd was behind us. This place was so loud, and Iowa State was not phased whatsoever. It came back out and responded and kept us, a battle until it could make the run there at the end of the half. And Purdue was the team that kind of lacked the mental toughness, which is something that you didn't think would be the case. I think one team really showed its poise, showed its experience, and another team with a lot of experience and typically a team with poise did not have that tonight.
Yeah, I'm just confirming this. Trey Conferman did not attempt a field goal in the second half. That is astonishing. It wasn't like he was in foul trouble. It wasn't like he was out of the game for long stretches, right? Like, he played 11 minutes, but a lot of that was they pulled guys early in this game because where was it going, right? They were completely taken out of who they were. Like, this was a game where Iowa State, and the thing is, what is impressive to me about Iowa State, I think we also need to look at this in that lens. This can't just be the Purdue letdown lens. It also has to be the lens of a team showing up and maybe announcing itself to the country that, like, hey, I know that we were number 9 in the nation, by the way, but no, we're better than that. We should probably get some number 1 votes, is I think what the Cyclones are saying tonight. Like, Iowa State came into this game the most prolific team in the nation at creating turnovers, and that was the rocket fuel to their offense. They have talented players, but that was really the thing. That was what they scored behind. And tonight, in the early stages of this game especially, Purdue was not falling victim to that. They had 5 turnovers in the first half. Only 3 of those were live ball turnovers, I think. And they weren't leading to points at the other. I think maybe one of them did, but they weren't giving up a lot of pick sixes in the first half. And Purdue was the team doing that. So Iowa State did not even have to play its style of basketball for a half in order to come in and walk out of here with one of the most impressive wins in the country this year. I had been the one saying for a couple of weeks now, ever since the Players Era tournament, like, Michigan should be the number 1 team in the country. Like, I don't vote the way some people do, where you can't move a team down. Like, Michigan earned it. Like, they had the best resume of wins in the country, and including like a 40-point stomp of, I can't remember who, of Gonzaga, another like 30-point win. I think they won. It was like 2 30-point wins and a 40-point win out there, something insane against good teams. And now you've got Iowa State coming onto the floor of the number 1 team and winning by 23, and it was as much as 27, I think, at one point. Like, I'm very impressed by this. This is what another national champion. This is probably the first team I've seen them play this season where I thought, oh, that could be a national championship caliber team. And this is the result on Purdue's home floor.
Yeah, and Iowa State's I think Iowa State is in a situation like Purdue was a couple of years ago, where it's a team that has had good years, has not really broken through in the tournament and gotten to the final weekend. And Purdue did that in 2024, and it felt like for Matt Painter and the people that were part of that, it was like finally like the breakthrough that now ultimately can get you into the conversation of national championship talk. And it's not, it's not hearsay or whatever. It's like there's some validation that you have a program that's been there before. I think Iowa State's been on the rise. They've had some good years under T.J. Osselberger, and now they have a team that seems like it maybe could be one of those breakthrough teams. You're right. The second half, Purdue gave up 46 points, and the offense wasn't there. It just kind of became a catastrophe. I don't think that Purdue is as bad as the final score says. Iowa State might be as good as the final score says, but it's all going to be told moving forward because Purdue's it's not an easy road ahead. Purdue plays Minnesota on Wednesday, which is a much improved team this year.
Just beat IU.
Marquette, which is down this year, but still it's a good matchup. Plays Auburn after that. So, this is a tough stretch of games here for Purdue that if you let this carry over, it can really doom your season.
I've been talking from the beginning of the season about, like, if you want to talk about Purdue being a national championship caliber team, you have to talk about them being better than just good enough on defense. Like, you have to be a very strong defensive team to win a national championship. This isn't like teams don't, and Matt Painter was talking about that tonight. Like, hey, we can go out and we can score 90 and win, but if we don't score 90, if we have to find a way to grind out a win, he said, this was his words tonight, I don't think we're capable of grinding out a win right now. That's kind of a damning statement to me, because I would feel like a team this veteran and this deep should be poised to have its coach think of it maybe first and foremost, we know how to grind out a win. We just know how to find a way to make it happen. And I think a goal from now until sort of like last year, that talk of like the difference between Auburn and Houston and how they got to Houston. And when they got to Houston, they almost had figured out how to grind out a win. They essentially did and just came up on the wrong side of it. That's what they've got to show everyone and themselves between now and March, or whenever this comes up again. It probably will come up before March. You got Michigan, Illinois, Michigan State, UCLA, the teams you were just mentioning in the non-conference. Like, you've got plenty of opportunities probably where this is going to come up again. Do you find yourself, when do they find a way to grind it out? Because I know Matt Painter's brought this up a few times. I think it's just common sense. Like, nobody just goes in and just blows people out for 6 games in the NCAA tournament, really. Like, at some point, you're going to have to find a way to win one that's guts as much as anything else. And a performance like this goes in the con column, doesn't define anything, but as you're like compiling what you think about a team and where you're going to pick them to finish, that goes in the con column of whether they're going to be the team that does that.
Yeah, and I'm sure people will point to the Alabama game and say, well, didn't Purdue grind out a win there? I think Purdue more outscored Alabama a little bit.
I think that's both would be a fair way to look at that, I suppose. Yeah, but that was a game where they both scored in the 80s, I think, maybe for that game.
It was 87, 81, 87, 80, something like that.
So, yeah, that fits in more with what he's talking about. Yeah.
But Alabama also had a chance at the end of the game from the free throw line. I think missed a free throw that could have cut it to one possession game. So maybe Alabama hadn't learned how to grind out a game yet at that point too. Listen, it's still very early in a very long season. Don't take this as like, well, Purdue, should drop 10 spots in the polls or anything like that. I think if they played this game again tomorrow, it would be a lot closer than it was. But I also think Iowa State in a lot of ways showed it was a better team than people thought, and maybe a better team right now than Purdue is.
All that's true. At the same time, and often I'm the one who's hesitant about, like, hey, let's not talk about national championships. Let's not talk about whatever. Like, it's hard to win any games in the NCAA tournament. I think no team has proven that over its history more than Purdue. And you've got to, let's not think like crazy. Let's look at it a little bit more organically. But this team talks about everything in terms of, this is our chance to win a national championship. This is our best chance, Purdue's best chance to win a national championship under Matt Painter. The players talk about it all the time that's the goal. So if that's the goal, then you can't say, well, if we could play them again tomorrow, then it'd be a lot different, because there is no tomorrow in the NCAA tournament unless you win. And I just think that this game, this magnitude of loss is really it does reset some things in my mind, because I had started to think, especially that Texas Tech performance, and maybe we'll find out that Texas Tech isn't as good as we thought they were going to be, but that Texas Tech performance and the way they just completely did this to them on a neutral court, I thought was the start of something defensively. And I think it can't be, I think today was a reminder that Purdue can be that good defensively, but it can't only be that good defensively when it makes shots. Yes, making shots helps you play defense, and it helps you get back and set up your defense. Those things are correlated, but it can't be that unless you make shots, you aren't going to have a good defensive game, because you're going to have to do that at some point. And I thought tonight, you mentioned, Iowa State, I think, averaged 1.4 points per possession almost in the second half. And some of that was when Purdue started to turn the ball over and they took advantage. But that stretch where Jefferson left the game, a point where Purdue could have made a move, Iowa State made 5 straight shots by 5 different guys.
Yeah, I'm going to give Milan, I don't know how to say his last name, his flowers, because he hit some tough shots at the end of the shot clock. But also, Matt Painter said, yeah, I can live with that guy making that shot because he played great defense, but I can't live with giving him an open corner 3, which Purdue also was susceptible to doing. The core values is what Matt Painter called them, like defense and rebounding, effort, things like that have to be there every single game, because shot making is not going to be there every single game. I thought actually in the first half, Purdue did a pretty decent job defensively of making Iowa State take some tough shots. They just made them. And then in the second half, that was not the case. I thought Iowa State was able to do whatever it wanted offensively, and Purdue still struggled to solve the mystery that was the Cyclones' defense.
They were 7 of 12 from 3 in the second half, but I'm pretty sure they were 7 of their first 8. They were just bombing away. And I thought too many times where the closeout was too late, too many times where they let guys get loose, and you're paying for it, especially because you're not making any shots at the other end. I thought Tamin Lipsey was big in this game too, point guard for Iowa State, who missed the last 3 games, has been out with a lower body injury. He was supposedly questionable or game time decision coming into today. He finishes 9 points, 8 assists, 0 turnovers in almost 32 minutes. I mean, that was a really strong lead guard performance, and I thought the rest of the team fed off of that.
Yeah, he was extremely good. And there were other guys. Matt Painter pointed out a couple of guys, but one of them being Toure Killian. And he said,
Killian Toure,
sorry, yeah.
Yep.
He hit 3 threes, which is not something you would expect, but you kind of have to come to find out, guys who don't hit a lot of threes tend to hit a lot of threes against Purdue in Mackey Arena. It happened with Derek Queen last year, for example. And then they go through a stretch where they don't hit one for a month.
Yeah, they had that. The Derek Queen was the best example. But Purdue fans know that this is a thing that happens sometimes. Like the guy who never hits threes. It should be called the Derek Queen Award, because he had an amazing season last year from 3. When you look at it relative to the Purdue game. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but the thing that stands out is kind of the defense that some of these guys played. And Matt Painter said you can look at a box score and it can kind of lie to you a little bit sometimes, because the only defensive stats on a box score are blocks and steals.
Yeah.
And sometimes just locking the guy down and forcing him to miss shots or turn the ball over or things like that, you don't get credit for it on a stat sheet, but it helps your team win games. And Iowa State, obviously, defensively made Purdue shoot poorly, played excellent defense, turned the ball over, or forced Purdue to turn the ball over 10 times in the second half, when the game was very much in question, especially, as he mentioned, when one of the best players on the team is sitting on the bench and you think could be a turning point in Purdue's favor, and it ends up flipping the other way around.
Yeah, Toure was a problem for Braden Smith all night. He was picking him up right across half court. Like I said, they were crashing down on Trey Kofferman. He always had 2 or 3 people around him if he ever touched the ball. Just haven't. But again, I thought Iowa State did a better job in some ways of accepting that. Accepting the physicality and finding a way to score anyway. I just thought I thought you saw that. I thought you felt that today in this gym. That's not something I have felt every game about Purdue. I think there have been other times where they've shown the toughness. They obviously follow Trey Kofferman's lead on that. Oscar Clough is coming along as that kind of presence. But today I thought Iowa State flipped it. I thought it was a little bit of a perfect storm. Cyclone was an appropriate mascot today, because I thought there was a sort of a vortex that Purdue got trapped in there at the start of that second half. And some meteorologists are going to tell me that's not the correct way to use those terms, but they just ran roughshod on them in the second half.
And as good as Iowa State was playing defensively, Purdue still had some clean looks from three in the first half. If those fall down, maybe it's totally different. Maybe you ride that momentum. Maybe you force Iowa State to have to do some different things defensively, but Purdue didn't make shots. So what Iowa State was doing was going to work in the context that Fletcher Lawyer struggled shooting from the outside. I thought Meyer had a couple of good looks that he missed from the outside. And then it seemed at times in the second half, guys just got hesitant to shoot when they had an opportunity. And that's not been a Matt Painter mantra. He's always said, hey, you're a good shooter, let it fly. And maybe it's because of the situation or whatever it might be. Guys just got hesitant or, and it seemed like Purdue almost was like overpassing or like kind of relying on Braden Smith to have to dribble around and bail the offense out at times.
They did just seem kind of stagnant and bogged down at times, just sort of like stuck in the mud a little bit. And they were getting late into the shot clock a lot. I thought that was absolutely true. Yeah, it was a pummeling, man. I'm trying to remember the last time, like, because I wasn't at the Auburn game, I didn't see that in person. But again, still, we thought that was like such a bad matchup for Purdue.
No, I was not surprised by that outcome. I'm very surprised by this outcome.
I want to say, like you mentioned the 3-point shooting. Like Purdue's like a 40% 3-point shooting team. They make 4 of 18. So if they make 40%, that puts them around like 7 threes. So then you give them those extra 9 points. This is still a pretty comfortable win. But I think what the bigger point is, like, if they make a couple more in the first half, or if they make a couple more during that stretch to start the second half, it's not so much what it means in terms of the points that they score. It means a lot for that team psychologically, at least in this performance. And I think Purdue has to get to a post whatever you want to call that. It has to get beyond that. It has to get to a place where it can be the kind of team that finds a way to win this game, 62-60 or whatever it takes. And a long way to go, but there will be other challenges like this before you get to March.
Yeah, and very well could happen Wednesday. You would think Purdue is heavily favored to beat Minnesota, but you're only as good as your next game. So if Purdue goes out and wins 81-58 against Minnesota, do you feel a lot better about it? Did Purdue fix the problem in a few days? Probably not, totally, but it's got to start somewhere. And sometimes games like this, I think back to 2 years ago, and it's different because Purdue was on the road, but Purdue went to Nebraska, and Keisei Tominaga went ham. He just hit every shot he threw up. He was hitting fadeaway threes from 25 feet and running down the court, just holding his face like, I can't believe what's happening right now. And you're like, well, is Purdue really a national title contender if Nebraska can do this to Purdue? And it probably was one of the best things that happened to Purdue. That can be the case with this to some degree if it makes you better moving forward. And you probably the biggest thing to come out of this is Purdue has to be tougher.
Here's the other thing, though. If this was an Iowa State team that, and yes, Matt Painter was pointing out that, like, some of these guys, I don't know if they've ever made 3 in a game before. Okay, fair. Like, maybe some guys who weren't priorities from 3 on the scouting report hit some shots. But Iowa State is a team. Their game right before this, they hit 22 of 30 from 3, which is...
I thought it was 23.
I think it was 22 or 23. It was 70-something% from 3 against Alcorn State. Like, they just buried Alcorn State earlier this week. But, like, this is like that Iowa State can hit a lot of threes in a game should not have been a shock. And they were, obviously a little bit more judicious with it today, but 11 of 23. Like, they were just they were better at everything today. There was nothing they weren't better at. They were the better team in pretty much every facet. They made Purdue look like a very ordinary team today. And that's not something that you say about a team a lot and still talk about them as a, like, national championship caliber team. I'm not trying to overdo it in terms of, like, what one game means. But when you look at it from the magnitude, from the location, I want to give Iowa State full credit. And I think, Olsenberger said this when he came in too, was like, they knew they had to play a great game to beat Purdue, and they played a great game. Like, you always know you have to play a great game, and then one out of however many times you actually hit the thing, right? You actually just everything comes together, even though you had a little adversity again with one of your star players being in foul trouble, and you still just hit the jackpot, and things just kind of go your way in important ways. There's something to be said for that, but I think there's also something to be said for between now and when we start talking very specifically about Purdue's NCAA tournament aspirations, it has to find a way to be the team that interrupts it. You can't. There's going to be nights where teams are playing great, but you've got to find a way to interrupt it. And that interruption at a crucial point just did not come. In fact, not only did it not come, but Iowa State just kind of kept going with it. Because after Jefferson came back in and they were up 18, pretty soon they were up 25, 27. Like, they just kept pouring it on.
Yeah, and I think the biggest disappointment, I guess you could call it, watching it was Purdue hanging its heads or begging for fouls, kind of doing some uncharacteristic things that could tell you that it had kind of waved the white flag a little bit there midway through the second half. It's not traditionally who Purdue is, but that's kind of how this game turned out. It just like you knew it was over pretty early in the second half, and I think Purdue realized it was over, and then you saw the after effect was just like, it carried all the way to the very end of the game.
I mean, they're talking about things like connectivity and togetherness on defense in the post game. And again, some of this is like, we talk to these guys, they haven't watched any film. These guys are still in uniform. They come in there, they just got dusted. And I think they're doing their best sometimes to explain what they feel like happened out there on the floor. But those are just not words those are words that betray what this team's identity is supposed to be, as far as being veteran, being experienced, being cohesive, because they played together this much. And it's the three guys who've been here the longest that were in that room. So I think the answer has to come from those three guys. Those three guys, the next time this starts to happen, it has to come from those three guys. You've got guys who can come in and play, who are important defensively. Jakari Harris, Daniel Jacobson. Like, those people come in and play important roles on this team defensively, but they play less minutes for a reason. And there was I thought the fact that Jakari Harris, and he had a really good game against Rutgers, but like that stretch of the game where Purdue needed a basket so badly, and Iowa State was content to just let Jakari Harris keep shooting threes, that told me something that like it was just I'm not trying to rip Jakari, because I think he has come along as a 3-point shooter, but he's not the first person that Purdue wants shooting like in multiple possessions in succession, right? And it was a sign of Iowa State getting done what it wanted to get done defensively.
Yeah, and Jakari Harris 0 for 3 from 3. He did have, I don't know if he got credit for the steal, but he did have a nice play on defense, and that's the number one reason he probably gets the minutes he gets is to be an on-ball defender. But it was, somebody messaged me and was putting the blame on a specific player after the game, and I said it's kind of weird that the whole team did not play well. This isn't on one player. There's no one reason this happened. It was a collective unit from 9 guys, I believe. I guess Liam Murphy came in late, so 10 guys, but mostly 9 guys who played a bulk of the minutes, just did not play well for the most part. And on the other side, they played 9 or 10 guys, and most of them did play well, all the way to the point where Matt Painter mentioned specifically like number 0, Nate Heisey, who hasn't played for a couple games, comes in and is that spark, a guy that knows his role, didn't hang his head, came in a crucial game and made an impact.
I was having a quick Twitter exchange with someone who was making the point about late in the first half, Matt Painter set down Smith, Lawyer, and Coffin-Wren all at one time. Right. And that's where Iowa State kind of made a little move, and that he thought that they never really recovered from that. And I think that's a worthy thing to point out. But I would just come back and say, but again, it's only 4 points at halftime, where Purdue had made like 2 of 12 threes or 2 of 10 threes. And so you're only down 4. You're not turning the ball over like you don't want to against a team this good at creating turnovers. And you've got all those starters on the floor to start the second half, and one of their 3 best players, maybe their best overall player, goes and sits on the bench, and you go from being down 6 to down 18 in 8 minutes.
Right.
Like, that to me is where this game was decided, that when they needed primary guys to step up and interrupt what Iowa State was doing, it wasn't there today. And hey, hats off to Iowa State. And not everybody can be on at their A game, I guess, 100% of the time. But I think you got to find a way to be closer to your A game than what this was in games that, like, again, if you find a way to win this on top of everything else Purdue has been doing, it's just one more, like, you want to be a number one seed in the NCAA tournament. And you want to be the number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament this year because it puts you on that St. Louis, Chicago, Indianapolis path, right? So anytime you have an opportunity to beat a top 10 team and it gets away, and there are any circumstances, that's not good. But frankly, this is a team that you could be going head-to-head with let down the line for that number one overall seed in the Midwest. Well, who's got the data point in their favor right now?
Team that won by 23.
Yeah,
on Purdue's home court. So.
Like, don't be surprised if we're not talking about this loss again in March.
Yeah, listen, Purdue wasn't going to go undefeated, so this is out of the way now, I guess. If you want to take a positive spin out of this, so.
I even like they were that winning streak at home was going to end at some point. They schedule tough. It increases the magnitude that it could happen. So I think losing any game, any regular season game in itself is not a disaster. But when you get thumped at home to this extent, you're supposed to be one of the best offensive teams in the country. You don't even score 60 points. You get just completely trounced in the second half defensively. Like, it's the magnitude. It's that gives me pause right now. And I think forces us to step back and kind of recalibrate and recognize. I think it's just a team crashing back to earth a little bit that had hit the right notes early on, and now how do you respond to this? Like, what's the bounce back from this?
Yeah. So
my computer's going to die soon.
Yeah, I think that's enough from today.
But yeah,